Hello, I'm Corey Moss, and I am here with some very good friends of mine on the eve before New Year's Eve, December 30th, 2015. It is the end of the year. Either finally or wow, this year flew by. But we're going to talk about the year that flew by, and we're not going to talk about 2016, and, we'll say why in a minute. Actually, one of us is prohibited from talking about next year. So, for legal reasons, and he'll explain later. But anyway, again, I'm here with very good friends, and one of them is my podcast partner in crime, Johnny Moda, out there in wine country, USA. How's it going, Johnny?
It's very cold. Very, very cold. We're actually now starting to get some sort of watery substance that the rest of the world gets that we have not gotten for the last year and a half. So good or bad, depending on where you live in the world.
Cold. And now once you start...
Tears. They're God's tears.
God's tears rating in part wine country. So this year has been very dry. If you buy wine from this year from where I live in this beautiful part of the country, it will be very expensive. Not that it isn't always. It'll just be more expensive than usual.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good to know. I don't know what that has to do with anything now, but okay, we'll figure it out. But anyway, yes, Johnny has been my podcasting partner in crime. And I guess I can say that because, Johnny, we have done probably, I think, over 40 podcasts together.
That's way more than I was going to say. I was going to say like 2 or 3.
Yeah, well, you were thinking 2 or 3, and I'm thinking over 40, and that's actually in the last 3 months. I don't know how we do this. I really don't.
I don't ever sleep.
No, I never do either. We do them in our sleep too. But anyway, we'll talk a little bit more about those. And but we also have some very special people here from different ends of the technology realm. The first one, the chief contrarian, Accession Events, and writer of The End of Certainty. There it is behind him. There you go. Simon Dudley. How are you, Simon?
Hi, Corey. I'm good. It's New Year's Adam, as in Adam comes before Eve. See, the last funny thing I've ever going to say just was said. So it's terrible fun. There you go. My sister told me you can blame her.
We hope you develop a little more funny content before we're through tonight.
Well, no pressure then. So thanks for letting me on the show again. Should be fun talking about 2015.
Yep.
No idea what I'm going to say about 2016. Yes, I do. Nothing, because I'm doing my own podcast about 2016 next week.
That's right. Simon has a podcast next week to talk about the year that hasn't been yet. And the reason we don't talk about next year or even the next day is because, we had a little thing with Johnny Moda on one of the podcasts where, we weren't sure if he was going to be around the next day. And honestly, we're not sure if, let's say, we're not going to be around the next day and Johnny's going to be the only person here on Earth who does AV. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, Johnny.
If I'm the only one left around doing AV in the world and there's no one else in the world, who am I doing AV for, myself? Which is okay because I have enough speakers to kind of keep myself busy. So, yeah, okay.
No content will be produced.
Yeah. And if it would be unwatchable.
I think I want to be one of them.
Reviews would be great.
I'll bet there will be a Surface Hub somewhere for you to do something with, though, Johnny.
What's the software for?
I'll use it as a couch.
There's a good idea. Also with us tonight is the wonderful Christina Chrissy Eng. Chrissy, there you are. Yes, point to yourself. With something that she talks about in every podcast that she does with us, but now we have the opportunity to actually see. And that is that wonderful bike that sits behind her on the wall. There it is in full view, that Shrek bike.
In full view.
And when's the last time that thing actually came off the wall, Chris?
I think it's been almost 2 years.
2 years.
In my defense, I had shoulder surgery, but yeah, it's been about 2 years.
In your defense, you had shoulder surgery.
You're using your feet, aren't you? Surely surely on that bike. I mean, what kind of bike is that?
Chrissy's
It is.
different. She
Yeah.
uses her hands.
No wonder you need
She's
plastic surgery, and that's easy for you to say. After
Simon, she flies
It's like
drones with her
penny
feet
farthing.
too.
it's
It's like
crazy.
a penny farthing.
Yeah, she flies drones with her feet too, but that's another story.
I think that's authorized.
She's commander of the sky. That's why she had shoulder surgery. Just
That's right. So, Chrissy Yang, for those who don't know you yet, and I can't imagine there are many out there who don't, so tell us a little bit about yourself. You are a drones, UAV, UAS, whatever the situation is, whatever the proper audience is. How does that go in terms of, what you tell them that you do?
I love that you asked me like 4 questions at once.
I know.
just
answer all of
I
them.
don't have a lot of time tonight, so I'm trying to get them all in at
shotgunning,
once.
right? 45 minutes, shotgun.
Yep.
So, yeah, so basically, so what I do is I try to guide people down the correct path for them to fly their, whatever you want to call it, your unmanned aircraft, your drone, your RC aircraft, if you're a hobbyist or you're doing this for commercial. Basically what myself and my company does, UA Solutions Group, is we try to guide people down the correct path for them to make sure that they're compliant with all the legal regulations. And we also build their internal programs. That sounds so boring. And that's why I drink on these podcasts.
So you're not boring yourself.
I got to pedal my bike.
We're all interested, but you seem to not be. I don't know why.
I think
Yeah.
everybody's, I mean, I think after you've been in an industry for so long, it's the same thing over and over and over. And after a while, I think you become numb to it a little bit.
Well, I have to pick up my first prop as we saw your prop behind you, and that is this. So where I met Chrissy was the Stampede Big Book of that's AV, not VA. I'm in VA. The Big Book of AV tour here in DC Metro a few months back. And so anyway, I was told by one of the Stampede people, go see Chrissy, see her session. She talks about FAA and regulations. And I said, any AV? And they said no. And I said, good, I'm going. So there was no AV in the discussion at all. But I must say it was very, it was a very good discussion. Chrissy and I spent a little time afterwards talking, but we really spent more time at the lunch session talking, me getting to more about drones, her getting to know more about AV. And ever since, we've been very good friends, and Chrissy's been appearing on our podcasts that Johnny and I do in our sleep. And, it's been great having you as a good friend and, and technology wise with drones and everything else. So, before we get back over to Simon, so Chrissy, there seems to be a lot of talk in the industry, of course, about drones in commercial usage. There are those who are very interested, those who are mildly interested, and those who say, So, what do you have to say for those, maybe those people especially, or across the board?
Yeah. So one of the things that one of the big hurdles that people have with getting into the commercial aspect is it seems like there's just so much regulation that it becomes very difficult to kind of separate the chaff from the wheat and to really figure out what applies to them, what doesn't apply to them. The FAA is constantly changing their rules and regulations right now. They're coming out with different policies. They have different rules that they go back and interpret and come out to the people and say, oh yeah, we know that we've been doing it this way for the last 10 years, but we've reinterpreted this rule and this is really what it means. And so one of the big things that people have a problem with trying to get into the industry is just trying to figure out these rules and regulations. And trust me, it's difficult for us also because I always tell people what we tell you today does not mean that that's what's going to be around tomorrow, because these rules and regulations are changing so quickly and so rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that is probably the biggest hurdle that people have, is trying to figure out if what they're doing is legal, how to do it legally, and how to stay on top of those regulations.
Well, and a question I have for you, and certainly Simon and Johnny, whatever they'd like to add, is there are those who say, well, okay, drones in the market, hey, listen, let's pay attention to integration, to room integrations, all of that. Why are we looking at drones? I mean, what do you have to say to that?
So just like any new emerging technology, drones are kind of on the forefront of this technology right now. And at first, I agree. People said, and even I was kind of skeptical about drones and AV because I didn't understand AV. And I think that one of the things that we have, one of the dilemmas we have with people with AV is they don't understand drones. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to marry these two together and explain how drones actually fit into the AV sector. Okay. And what you need to get away from is drones don't fit into the AV sector when you're talking about a home theater system.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't work. And I agree wholeheartedly. It doesn't work.
Or a
So
boardroom system if you're on the commercial side.
Essentially, I mean, I'm sure that I could figure out, I could probably brainstorm some pretty good ideas as to how to figure out
sure
make
you
that work
could,
or
yeah.
what you could use that for. But when you look at something like, you look at the NFL, all they're doing is replacing their aerial cams with drones. And if the aerial cams are connected to the AV system, then the drone needs to be connected to the AV system. It's no different. It's just another camera on a different platform. Another great place for it is in a security system. There are a couple of security companies that are using drones. And what we have to make sure is that the drone and the data coming down from the drone is connected fully integrated into the AV system. And we're not necessarily saying that drones are a part of AV. What we're saying is drones are in addition to the systems that you already have in place. Mm-hmm. And when you build these AV systems out for a corporate environment who want to use drones in a certain capacity, you need to make sure that all the pieces and parts are fit together. Drones have they're a little bit different because we're looking at frequencies, we're looking at FCC regulations, and that's where someone like, my company comes in and helps them navigate that. So, do you have a question on the floor?
I do actually, Christy. Thank you, Simon Dudley, Austin, Texas. So one of the things, I'm a little bit familiar with the security camera world because of my background in video conferencing. And it transpired that a company like I was interviewing the old sales director from Covey recently, and they made security camera systems. And there was a problem that they made high definition video. This is like 10, 12, 15 years ago, but it wasn't certified in some way so that you couldn't use it as evidence in court, for example, for whatever reason. I don't remember why, and it perhaps is irrelevant to the purposes of this conversation. But for example, are there rules about how good the cameras are? If you're doing a security application and you see some fella leaving a location and you've got a film of him, can you use that in court if it comes from a drone, or does it need to have a certain type of certificate? Or, can you say, yeah, that's probably him? I mean, how does that, is there rules about this stuff?
Ooh, Simon, you got me on that one. You really do. I don't know. That's a really good question. And these are the things that we're trying to flesh out, because if it's a first of its kind and people haven't had to use that technology, say in a court of law, and they haven't submitted it as evidence, we're not going to know that until we have more case law. I'm not a lawyer, so I think the term is case law. And
it would be. I mean,
and so that it
would all be down to precedence.
You need to have precedence. And one of the things that we're finding out with unmanned aircraft, which if anybody follows me on Twitter, Missing Wyoming, if anybody follows me on Twitter, you'll notice that one of the things I keep talking about is, in order for us to really figure out what rules and laws and regulations are going to be upheld, it has to go to court somewhere. Somebody's going to have to, it's going to have to be more than just the FAA saying, this is how we interpret this law. I think we have to have case law. We have to have precedent set. And right now we don't have a whole lot of that in order for us to move forward on this. There are cases I do know with ATF. They've used unmanned aircraft and they have used that data. There have been law enforcement personnel that we've worked with that have used that data. So I don't know what the rules and regulations are, maybe what type of quality. I would think that it has to do with who has access to it and who is able to manipulate that. So just like any other evidence that is admissible in a court of law, the chain of custody has to be followed. And I would assume, remember what an assumption does, but I have to assume that we have to follow those same rules and procedures when it comes to custody, chain of custody.
And so it seems to me, I spoke with Kevin Kelly at Infocom last year about all this. And it seemed very obvious to me that lots of people looked at things whizzing around, right? And they had this whole room full of things whizzing around. And they said, that's what unmanned aircraft are about. But actually, it's all about the back end systems. I mean, these are almost just flying cameras at some level. All the storage and the two-way communications. They were talking there about big in first responder. If I'm a fire chief and I've got a refinery that's on fire, I don't want to run half a dozen firemen in there to find out what's on fire. I want to fly a couple of drones over the top.
Yeah.
But then what happens when they think it's one thing and then it's because it looks like it is, and then the whole refinery explodes and kills 500 people. And then whose fault is that? Is that the drone operator? Is that the drone? Is that the drone manufacturer? I guess we're about to find out in the next 10 years when all this stuff goes to court.
We are. And the other thing we have to understand about drones is that we don't just carry cameras on there. We also carry something. I know in Afghanistan, our aircraft had what's called a CRP, which is a comms relay package. So you send an unmanned aircraft up and all it is a repeater, right? So when you talk about AV, that's a great way to integrate. It isn't just the video, but it's also a comms relay package for audio for, when you look at FEMA, when you look at first responders, you look at natural disasters where the towers, have been destroyed by a tornado and there is no communications, you're able to put an unmanned aircraft up or something. Before we put manned aviation, put a manned aircraft up there and it was very expensive. So we had that, and then go ahead.
No, no. Okay, no, go ahead and finish because I had something to add to first responders and all.
So the other thing that works well is Honeywell makes a system called, and I'm going to botch this, it's either RAE or RAE, and what it does is it detects certain particulates in the air, whether it's gamma rays, beta rays. Are there beta rays? Did I just say that? Is that correct?
There is now.
We'll look it up later. We'll come back and we'll do this again.
Radiation. Yes, there is.
We'll look it up, come back and do it again.
It's Star Wars, so.
Beta rays, gamma rays, alpha rays, whatever.
Yeah. So, and any other type of particulates, gas, whatever it is. And you can send this sensor in on an unmanned aircraft versus having to send personnel in there. So, and I know that doesn't have anything to do with AV, but I just want people to understand that unmanned aircraft isn't just about flying something with a camera on it, like it's a flying selfie stick. So Corey, what was your question? No,
and I'll tell you what, we do, obviously we exist in the AV industry, but we exist in other industries too. So I don't want to limit talk to just AV here. But to say when we're talking about technologies involving drones, so I think some of the things I saw this year, now video's partnership with Stampede, and video of course leads to, things that we discuss all the time, Simon, with the drone integrated video conferencing with video, first responders being able to look at these sites from areas that you would not normally be able to as a first responder. And, that technology, I don't know where it is exactly right now, but, I'm sure as it goes, it's going to become a lot more meaningful. And of course, there are other things drones related, not to get too deeply into drones right now, because there are a lot of other things to talk about now. But, I have to say that, again, those in the market saying, oh, there's no place for it. The use case to me, obviously, with any technology, and it doesn't have to just be this, but AV, IT, and all, is very important. Well, and
I would argue, it's funny, right? So, and I don't mean to keep bringing it back to them, but they were the big players at the Infocom show this year and showed off a ton of unmanned vehicles. And I should point out, Chrissy, for the audience here, that when you talk about unmanned, you're talking about global hawks and predators, as well as go down to Best Buy and buy yourself a 4-rotor little jot. I mean, you're talking about the whole range, aren't you?
Correct. But, so we correct everything from as large as you can think of to as small as you can imagine.
Okay. But the AV industry is probably somewhere in the middle of that. I doubt many police forces, hopefully, I do live in Texas, there probably is one, police force is going to put a predator up.
No, but CBP uses predators down there on the border.
Really? Okay. Well.
Yeah. So there you go. There's your AV right there.
Well, okay, that's an interesting
for a large airframe, yeah.
So it's funny that a lot of people I met at Infocom and subsequently said, "Oh, drones have got nothing to do with AV," and my response was always to them, "Well, 2 points. One, why not? And secondly, if it isn't the AV type people who have experience with all the data that's coming off this, Corey, your line was excellent. The camera on a selfie stick in the air."
Mm.
type thing, right? Who else is going to do it?
Yeah.
You know, it seems to me that the AV resellers are actually in a pretty strong position to do it because nobody else is.
I would think so. Yeah. Well, that's a good point, Simon. That's a very good point.
So
And for
who else?
those who turn away and say, you know, I think they'll turn away from just about any technology that is not your basic integration. You know, and we talk about video conferencing and unified communications,
Sure.
and a lot have not even delved into all of what's out there. You know, a lot of them are still basically doing the hardware. So,
And
I mean,
that's most of my work is about how that business model is in serious trouble.
that's right. And we'll get to that. But what I want to do is now get Johnny Moda involved and talk about something that, that Johnny Moda, something that that this guy lives and breathes, and that is smart home and IoT. So, Johnny, in the world of IoT and smart home in 2015, what are some of the developments you've seen, some things you've been involved in integrations, people you've talked to in the commercial and the CD environment? Talk about that, Johnny.
Drones, drones, drones.
Thank you very much. And on to the next.
I didn't pay that. I didn't pay him for that, but thank you very much.
No, I want to talk about drones, but I'll bring it back later. Smart buildings, smart technologies. It's all in the last years, majorly because I live in California. Sensors, lots of sensors, daylight sensors, vacancy sensors, occupancy sensors, everything sensors, and they're building into codes. In this new year, where I live in Tel 24, it's going to be heavily more involved in sensors. I know we're not talking about the new year, so I won't get to that yet, but pretty soon you won't be able to build a home that isn't a really basic level of smart home. In commercials, even more advanced than that. Sensors everywhere, right? And a lot of people tell me it's stupid, and I deal with a lot of not so up to date on technology people and contractors who build these homes, and I am their constant tech support. And it's unfortunate because I want to educate these people who are building these buildings of America to be in the know, right? Because technology constantly changes. A lot of them are resistant, maybe just because of the way of the world previous to technology in homes. Now moving forward, everyone. I had this talk with Vin, CEDIA Vin, right? CEO of CEDIA, Custom Electronic Design Installation Association. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but the best quote that he'd give me is that a guy is building his home, and he told Vin, he's like, I don't know why, but all my gadgets, all my appliances, every appliance in my house is going to have internet connectivity. I don't know why, but I just know that I want it. But everything moving forward, like if we get into CES just right around the corner, I guarantee everything is going to be all about connected appliances. Why do you want that? That's everyone's been doing that for a few years slowly, but everything moving forward is connecting everything in your house. Now, whether or not that's important to you, well, I think we don't really have a choice at this point. I mean, would any of you agree at that point?
I would. Well, the thing I don't quite understand is why would the AV industry not embrace that? Like, thank you. Here's another 100 million person market to come and sell stuff. I mean, rather than turn around and go, oh no, that's got nothing to do with us. It's like, what are you kidding me? We've given you drones. We've given you Internet of Things at home. We've given you, Alexa or the Amazon thingamajig and the thermostats and all that stuff. Why wouldn't you want to do that? Oh, I only want to do monitors because there's a lot of money in hanging monitors on walls.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm starting to think it's more about technology embracing than technology convergence at this point. And AVIT convergence, I mean, let's stop it already. Because everybody has their own ideas of whether it exists, doesn't exist, or never will. But you're right, Simon. I think it's more about, embracing the technologies. They're there for the taking. You have so much you can add in to what you currently do in IT and IoT and other technologies. I think those who are going to get knee deep into it at this point, And though, there are those already and those who should, I think you're pretty much stating something that is, I mean, how do you argue it?
You
Well,
don't argue.
I have to say, as a consumer, though, the only way that I want my dishwasher to order my Cascade is if it goes over to my freaking coupon book and makes sure I have a coupon for it. And that is what really makes me mad. I don't want it just to go and like count how many times I'm wiping my bum and be like, oh, I think Chrissy's out of toilet paper. Like, how I don't understand how it's going to.
What do you mean you're not a dash button fan, Chris?
I'm going to figure it. Yeah. So I was reading something recently about, what's, we won't say that it's going to happen in 2016, but it's a 2015 thing where your dishwasher will know when you're out of dishwashing detergent and automatically order it to you. Well, I don't know. I don't want somebody to know how many times I've washed my dishes and then just to automatically order it. Now I get a package on my door and I'm all excited. It's going to be something cool. And it's freaking dishwashing detergent. No, man, it didn't have a coupon for it. And no coupon.
Other than the fact that that's totally mad, you do know how often you wash your dishes because you go and buy washing powder. I mean, it's not like, oh well, I'm gonna screw with them. I'm not gonna put any detergent in the dishwasher for the next 4 months. I'll die of ptomaine poisoning.
Chrissy, is there any reason you're hiding this information from people?
What you're saying is madness.
Yeah, well, okay, well.
Just saying. Sorry, I know you've been in all the armed forces. You'd probably kill me with that look, which you patently are right now. But no, that's madness. No, you want to get, and more importantly, from an AV world perspective, these guys, I don't care if they like it. It doesn't matter to me if they think the world's going to do it. It's a market opportunity. Go and take it.
I agree. I get the marketing part, but yeah, I mean,
you don't want people to know how often you wipe your bum or you put your dishes away because they can work it out from what you buy.
I don't want anybody to know how clean I am.
I'm not sure where this is going right now, but so Johnny, where do we veer off course here? Hey, Johnny, what about the control side of IoT and smart home or commercial where all this is involved?
Yeah, so you want to know about IoT in commercial or in general, or just controls in general?
Make it up.
All right, straight face. We'll leave it from now forward. No, again, moving forward. Energy efficient buildings, doesn't matter if it's residential or commercial, and moving forward because of building codes, commercial is advanced than residential, but the energy efficiency, the automation, looking at automation and controls, there's two ways of viewing it that I see, and some people will be one way or the other. One is convenience, the other is luxury, and I strongly feel that it's both. And building, whether that is commercial or residential home, putting controls in the home should service both. It is a nice convenience, but it's also kind of a luxury. It should be able to provide you the convenience of certain things that you don't have to do. In large-scale facilities, it's easy to leave multiple, if just taking lighting. I live in California where electricity is insanely expensive. Leaving multiple lights on in a single building can add up very quickly, and paying for it isn't cheap. And with the controls portion on lighting, LED has helped with the wattage consumption being down, but at the same time, it's very costly to purchase upfront. So that's one, you pay upfront more, but it also reduces power consumption. The other portion is dimming controls and things like that. So giving the building capabilities of daylight harvesting. If it's sunny outside, I obviously don't need a certain amount of light. Waking up in the middle of the night, pushing a single button, I don't need it at full intensity, one, because I don't want to get just a shock of light in my eyes, but maybe gradually increase the light up to, say, a moderate level. And should I need more, I can by increasing dimming, this and that. But it will prolong the light source and giving the building the capability to choose based on time of day and globally throughout the year with the time shift. Things like that are so easy to give a building that smarts, and people don't often don't quite understand, but that doing that is really good for you, good for the light source, good for prolonging, well, your money essentially, right? But at the same time, the building, whether that's commercial or residential, and that's just in lighting. AV is a whole nother portion or your network and things like that. But that's just like smart capabilities. So when I talk about sensors being in a room, someone's in the room, leave the lights on. If you're not in the room, don't have them on. And the same with dimming and so on. But that's just a simple thing.
Johnny, I know this is slightly out of topic on the grounds it's not AV related, but on the same token, can you turn off air conditioning into certain, because air conditioning costs an awful lot more than lighting does, or it certainly does in Texas. My electricity bill in the winter is $80 a month. My electricity bill in my house in the summer is $500 a month. We don't turn any more lights on. In fact, we turn on less lights in the summer. So could you, for example, in residential or commercial, now detect that no one's in a room? I suppose technically you only detect when people are in the room, and then not only turn the lights off, but also turn the air conditioning off for a room, or turn it so that it goes up to 85, for example, not 72, or whatever it is you would normally do. Is that possible yet, or even in code?
I haven't seen that in code, but I don't see why it shouldn't be, because like you said, it's expensive, right? And, even if it's just one small facility or full facility, it's easy. What I do is things like load shedding, right? I know in certain parts of the house, it's a guest house. I don't need to feed that room with power or HVAC because no one's there 3/4 of the year, or in a building, we don't use this boardroom, or we don't use that. But based on sensors, I don't see why you couldn't tie it. I haven't done that. That's a great idea, though, Simon.
The reason it's probably not necessarily possible is that if you have a heating system, and I just use my own house as an example, they're normally in series. So I have, 4 or 5 rooms are all one pipe, a bit like Ethernet used to be back in 1985. They would be in a line, and you'd undo your T-piece. So if you close one off, well, I don't know. No, maybe not. That's not true. You could probably do it. You just automatically open and close vents. I got half my house has got no one in it most of the time.
So Nest, it's not Nest, but they talk kind of with Nest. They have vents that go, and I don't quite get how it works, but you replace your vent on your wall, right? You replace that, and there's a smart sensor in that. And it detects when people are in the room and they're not in the room, and it starts figuring out how often you're in the room, when people are in the room, and it starts closing those certain rooms off during certain times because it turns into a smart sensor. They do have those. I saw an article recently about that.
What we do is you put dampers, so each room has a zone and a thermostat, and each thermostat is set to a zone. Johnny's bedroom, Lisa's bedroom, so and so on, or room, boardroom X, B, Y, whatever. And you only turn on what you need because you don't need to heat the whole facility if no one's in there. So the same thing. Yeah. So if you have sensors or smart sensors, that's even better. But that's why I mentioned with sensors, basically anything's possible. I've done a gentleman's home where he has the sunroom, and it's just a big glass ceiling in his room in this home. And when he goes to, it's sunny or whatever, he hangs out in the sunroom. And he left one day into San Francisco, which is about an hour drive. He got to San Francisco, and it's pouring down rain. Turned around, drove home because he left his sunroof, which is basically the entire room open with expensive furniture and things like that, open to where it was just susceptible. So when he got there, nothing was damaged, and he gave me a call and called me and said, "Hey, this is the scenario. This is what's going on. What's going on?" I said, "You're welcome. We put in sensors to prevent that. So to detect moisture, close the sunroof. You don't need it open, right? You don't want that damage." And he's like, "I didn't know you could do that." I'm like, that's one of the basic capabilities of a smart home. By giving it sensors and thought or basic logic commands, if it's raining, close the sunroof. So I don't see why you couldn't do something like that, Simon.
Sure.
Okay.
So I would like to interrupt a second and say, well, Johnny Moda, there are those who may or may not know, yes, he does home automation, smart home, but Johnny does commercial integration too, because he lives out in wine country, and yes, they do have wineries. And, they must have companies out there too that need.
We don't have any companies here.
You don't have any companies out there.
Not a single one.
No, not at all. But wineries count, as well. But no, I mean, a lot of people know you, Johnny, on the home automation side, but you certainly do exist in the commercial realm too. And what I like having Johnny is the knowledge base that Johnny brings to both sides, and as well as being able to sit down with people like Vin at Cedia. talking to people like Chris Gamble in the UK and live install, the reach Johnny has. Yeah, Johnny's got a ton of followers out there on Twitter and all of that. So I think more than all of us combined right now. So I'm getting there though, Johnny. I'm getting there. So anyway, but yeah, Johnny. So that's all good stuff. And so just tell us quickly your latest and greatest commercial install.
A large hotel in Hawaii.
Hawaii.
Yeah, I've done multiple hotels. One of which, if you go to the Turtle Bay Resort in Hawaii, we just did a large renovation there, and a couple other ones. Some of which are owned by a man who owns Oracle. I won't say his name, but you could probably Google him.
Google Oracle, and you'll find that guy. And Johnny knows him so well. They have dinner and drinks often, right, Johnny?
Yeah, combined, we're worth billions.
Exactly. So I'll let Johnny rest a little. We're going to swing this over to the other person in the room here. So we heard about the book, all right, but there's something else behind him. I hope you're pointing to him, Christina.
I am.
There is some. Well, okay. If he points both ways, we'll get it right.
Technically, I'm up from the angle that I'm looking at you.
I know. Yeah. Well, okay. We'll try.
It's the Brady Bunch over here.
We'll try and let everybody figure this out. No, you should actually see AV Power Up when it's Brady Bunch, but that's another thing. Simon Dudley is the chief contrarian of Accession Events. Simon's background is, of course, in video conferencing and life size, and that's where a lot of people know Simon as the video evangelist. I think that'll follow you for the rest of your life, right, Simon? You cannot shake that.
Just like that prison sentence.
Right. But you are now the chief contrarian of Accession Events. So what does that mean, Simon?
Well, it's been an interesting year. Talking about year in review. What does it mean? Well, much of my work is still in the video conferencing space. I have a number of clients who I work with in the video conferencing world, both publicly and mainly not publicly. The other thing I did is one of the last pieces of work I did for my previous employer was look at business models. And I realized at that time that the business models for the video conferencing, AV, IT, UC world were changing. And the vast majority of the resellers and distribution and manufacturers had no idea what to do about that. You look at a world where services used to be delivered in boxes that you would stick a telephony solution in, or a video solution in, or an AV solution in, and there would be handsets on desks or PCs on desks, and there'd be servers in server rooms, and you would do a deal for a few $100,000 for a client, and you'd have to pay your sales guy 10% of the money for that, and then you go off and find another one, and you ring that same customer back about 5 to 7 years from now and see if he wants another one of these things from you. And it's all changed. The world of cloud has turned this whole business model on its head. It's much easier for clients now to be acquired by resellers because the barrier to entry is so much less. You can buy a service. For example, we're using Zoom right now for this video conference. This video conference solution that I'm using now cost me $15 a month from Zoom. It's great. It's great. If we were to buy this thing 5 years ago, we would be looking at $10,000 per user. So that's $40,000 worth, except one of us would have an $18,000 system with a MCU in it. And we'd have a recording device as well. So if someone sold the four of us this solution 5 years ago, it would cost $60,000 to $80,000. And it would cost 15 to 20% of that per year to continue to manage it and run it.
That's right.
Now it's $15 a month.
That's right.
So
you boil it down, right?
So what my job is, a lot of my work now is working with distribution, working with manufacturers, working with resellers to work out how do they survive in a business model where you can't even afford to pay your sales guy, because he would normally have taken, let's say, an $80,000 deal. Sales guy would probably take $4,000, $5,000 in commission. Well, hang on. hang on, your sales guy now he's sold me one solution. It's $15 a month. I'm making $180 a year. Woohoo! Well, he has to sell 1,000 times more than 1,000 times more. Actually, he needs to sell 2,000 times more to get the same amount of revenue. Now, how does he do that? Well, there's plenty of things you can do, and so, but it's not easy. And I'm not going to tell you all of them now. But I'm working with plenty of companies to help them re-engineer their businesses to cope with that. It's actually turned out to be, from my point of view, a far more interesting thing than talking about the bits and bytes of video conferencing technologies. And it's funny actually how the industry, and that's the industry's IT, video conferencing, UC, AV, kind of any two-letter acronym industry you really want, it's all been turned on its head, and the vast majority of manufacturers, resellers, and distribution have no idea how to cope with it. And they'll all go bust if they don't work out how to live in this new world. And ignoring it and hoping it goes away is not a winning strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If you ignore it, you'll be the one who goes away.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right.
So it's funny. I started my business 9 months ago now, just over, not expecting to be doing this sort of work, but actually it's turned out to be the most valuable for me personally and the most interesting for me professionally. And I'm a multi-billionaire, so I don't really need the money. Other than for food and accommodation, obviously, and stuff.
You, Johnny, and that Oracle guy,
Oh, yeah, between the three of us.
You're rich is beyond belief, I guess.
Yeah, it always reminds me of that joke Richard Branson said. What's the easiest way of becoming a millionaire? Buy an airline and be a billionaire. Yep. And anyway, so it's the most interesting part of the work, and I like doing interesting work. So that's why this year's been rather interesting, because you can see in the little video conferencing space how we've moved from the hardware players have started to fall away, and the cloud guys have just taken off like a rocket. I mean, an interesting example of a company, and of course, I'd like to imagine it was no coincidence that I worked for them, a company that really bit the bullet. In fact, it's the only player I can think of who truly, in the video conferencing space, who've actually reinvented themselves, was Lifesize. They went from a hardware business model to a cloud business model over the course of 12 months. Painful, hard thing to do, but they've done it. And it's interesting that none of the other players have. They either started as a hardware and their business is doing this, and I don't need to name them because they're anyone in the hardware video conferencing business, basically.
People can name the names themselves.
Yeah, that's exactly. And then there's the cloud guys, and the cloud guys have done this. I mean, you look at Blue Jeans, you look at Zoom, you look at Starleaf. Those business units are all taking off like crazy.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that disconnect. I mean, my book's all about what I call accession events, where someone comes along and redefines what success in a market looks like. And we're right in the middle of an enormous series of them in the market that I happen to have played in for 20 years.
Right.
It's kind of fun.
Right. Oh, yeah. So I tell you what, talking about video conferencing, you see, back in Enterprise Connect, I was there. It was my first time doing press and media. Certainly met with a lot of people, executives, got to see a lot of things. And of course, that faces the enterprise, where Infocom basically faces inward to integrators. And although I think even Infocom is trying to face that a little more towards, the IT manager and all. But, certainly a lot of revealing things going on there. And then throughout the year, certain companies are growing in profile, doing different things, introducing more things. But let's fast forward to right now and the biggest event of recent, which is the acquisition, Cisco acquiring Econo. So that happened. I remember waking up that morning, seeing it, my eyes popping. I don't know what it did for you at that point when you saw it, but
For the record, it did nothing for me.
Okay,
Just
okay. You went on with
for
your
the
day just
record,
like
I
nothing.
probably woke up that morning and had no idea what it even
Wow,
meant.
what's a Cisco and a Kano, right?
Well, you know
I'm
what?
Exactly.
You know what, Chrissy. The point there though is that be also aware that no one at Cisco noticed either.
Right.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I'm not having a go. That's no reflection on a Carno. It's a reflection on what a machine Cisco is.
Yep.
I mean, they bought the same week they bought a Carno for $700 million, right? Which was the biggest news in video conferencing since, well, probably since Cisco bought Tamberg.
Hamburg, right.
Whatever, how many ever years, 6 years earlier.
Yeah.
Right? But you know what? They also bought another company called Lancope the same week in the security space for $540 million.
That's right.
Did any of us notice? They bought another company the week after that for about $260 million. Who do, I don't know what they do.
Actually, I'll tell you, I did know about the Landco purchase, Simon, but I guarantee you there are a lot of us out there, or a lot of people out there in this environment who went,
The 83 people who work for Landcope knew.
yeah, right.
Someone at Cisco possibly knew, but nobody.
Right.
I mean, you know, it's a tiny, in the great scheme of things, from a Cisco juggernaut perspective, it's like me with a lawnmower hitting a snail. There's a noise and it's in the back of the bin. I mean, you just didn't notice it.
Yeah.
And again, I don't mean to be, that's not a reflection. I don't want to suggest now, he says, backtracking wildly, that a Carno is a snail. But relative to Cisco from a size perspective,
sure,
there's nothing to it. What was interesting to me about that deal was how, you know, there's a couple of players, right? Cisco had their infrastructure play had been Codian for a long time. They really hadn't done anything. They'd warmed over the Codian products a little bit. They painted the boxes blue. There really wasn't anything new out of Cisco. Their infrastructure play was getting old. But they were okay because Polycom's infrastructure play was even older, right? And then Acano and Pexip came in and started digging at them at the edges. I'm sure it was only a few percent of their business they lost to them. And they had all these new shiny boxes. And of course, Pexip and Acano were both ex-Tamberg stroke, Codian stroke, Cisco people. And so they all went off and created the next generation of products, and good for them. And of course, to get reabsorbed back into the business was ultimately a no-brainer. It's exactly what Cisco expects to do. And you think $700 million seems like a lot of money. But the last time I looked, which was about 3 days ago, Cisco had $48 billion in the bank.
Yeah.
And it was in the UK, and therefore it was tax-free money for an American corporation. So it didn't really count. They had to do something with the money. But I think what most interesting is that deal will close mid next year, I suspect. Maybe they'll probably get it done at the end by the end of Q1 due to Cisco's end of financial year. I think it's June.
I think Q2, yeah.
They'll get it done May, June timescale, I suspect. I think for me, the bit that's interesting is now what happens to Pexip.
And that's the good next question. It really is on a lot of people's minds, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
And for legal reasons, what the relationship now between Polycom, who desperately need an infrastructure play, a new refresh one, particularly now Cisco's got a Carno, and what Pexip does now that their major competitor is owned by Cisco, it's going to be an interesting play. You could argue, and I did recently, and it got an awful lot. I got an awful lot of new friends as a result of that.
Oh, I'll bet the friends came knocking at that point.
Well, people came knocking. I don't know if they're all friends. They want you to know where the bear was in the woods, I tell you now.
But anyway. You know, I have to stop you there, Simon, because you're getting into 2016, because now it's approaching, and, you know, because of legal reasons, you are not allowed to reveal
my thoughts. But it's interesting, there's two people who need a friend.
Yeah, no, that's true. But, you know, you mentioned Zoom. I think their profile just grows by leaps and bounds. It goes. I know the people there. I know Eric. You know Eric. Really, really just on the up and up.
Great. I mean, they're doing very well. They've got a good product. It's interesting that I think Zoom has got a great profile. But remember, US only, or North America only.
True.
They're
True.
not in Europe. They're not in Asia. I think that was a
True.
deliberate decision by Eric and his team, and almost certainly a very good one. One has to assume they're going to expand it beyond the US at some point. You know, in Europe, the other side of the sort of the coin would be Starleaf for doing, if not as well in Europe as Zoom is here. They're certainly making a lot of noise with a similar business model over in Europe, and I know that for a fact they're doing extremely well over there. It'll be interesting to see when Starleaf gets more serious in the US, which I believe they are, and when Zoom finally goes to Europe, which I assume they will. It'll be interesting to see how that all pans out. But it does show that all the interest and all the growth in this industry is all in cloud.
Well, and I'll tell you what, Blue Jean's the same, based in San Francisco, okay? But I got to tell you, the funding that they're getting now, the Derek Jeter investment in Blue Jeans was massive, okay? And now partnered, and they just did the thing with David Ortiz's retirement, and it all went very well. And that kind of thing being done is just so, it's something that none of us could have imagined, I guess, a few years back.
I don't think anyone could have imagined the valuations on the revenues. I mean, none of these companies are stating revenues, but the valuations are really quite incredible. You know, it's interesting to see that the valuations of the cloud players who don't actually have anything other than some intellectual property and a bunch of customers is far, far, far higher than the valuations of the hardware players.
Oh, yeah. And I don't think anybody wants to come out of startup either at this point. They're all very happy being startups with funding rounds and everything. You know?
Yeah, it depends. Yes, well, of course. I mean, because everyone wants to get bought by Cisco or someone, right?
That's the good. Oh, wait. I think I know what's going to happen.
Well, I don't think. No, I don't. I think that for any of the cloud players, that are out there today, I think the boat has gone for them, any of them, to be bought by Cisco for a number of reasons. The primary one being, who are Cisco's top 200 clients globally? They're all the ISPs and service providers and telecoms companies on a global basis. Cisco doesn't want to compete with them. But what it could do is put the Acano platform into Telefonica, AT&T, British Telecom, and they could build their own cloud services around it. And I think that would make perfect sense. That will be a competition for those cloud players. But the cloud players, I think, are growing so fast that, with the exception of Cisco, the hardware players are in trouble. And when I say hardware players, I mean hardware player. Hardware
player, right. But let me throw another name in this, and maybe the others here will hear that name and say something. There's this little company called Microsoft, okay? And so when I say Microsoft, Simon, in the whole grand scheme of things, don't say Surface Hub because it ain't here. But where does Microsoft figure into this whole wonderful environment at this point?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, so the first thing to say about Microsoft is what they are not is a company who buys other companies. I can't think of the last company that Microsoft bought. Maybe the Xbox people. I mean, they do not buy hardware companies, and they basically, to my knowledge, and I'm not a world expert. I mean, I know them reasonably well, but I don't know all the ins and outs of Microsoft. They do not have the same business model of Cisco. They develop their own products internally, and they can take forever. I mean, look at Link. You know, they've been mucking about with Link now for 10 years, and now it works pretty well. But for the last 10 years, all they did was hold everybody else up.
Right.
Which I think was an interesting model. They were in a position to afford to do it. But what they didn't do is go, we need an answer to a business problem now. Who's got one? They have, buy it. Right? It's just never their MO. So I don't think anyone's valuations in the cloud space or in the video conferencing space are predicated on a Microsoft valuation, Microsoft acquisition. Having said that, Microsoft products are getting better and better. A lot of people are beginning to do link-ins between, you know, Polycom being the obvious player here, are doing very tight integration between Polycom technologies and Microsoft services. I've never met a company that long-term does well out of a relationship with Microsoft. I mean, they get chewed up and spat out at some point. And I think you'd be I think I would be very circumspect about building a business that was predicated on having a long-term continued good relationship with Microsoft, because with the obvious exception of Intel, no one's ever managed that over the last 35 years or so.
So, Johnny, any Microsoft thoughts there, Johnny?
No.
No, no,
Not a single one, man.
no. Okay, all
I got
right.
nothing, man. Come back to me.
Okay, I'll come back to you. No, I know. I didn't know if Johnny would, but no, it's all very interesting. I don't know if you have anything to say about that, Chrissy. You know, where Microsoft and
Yeah, the only thing that's interesting for us in the unmanned aircraft drone world is the cloud computing. We have so much data. That's one of the things that we really talk about is one of the topics of discussion is what are we going to do with all of this data? So if anybody's listening to this right now, and by that I mean if anybody's listening to this right now,
they are. Trust me.
no problem.
Your mom is at least, you know.
I've got one follower. And so that's one of our big concerns, and something that's really important to us is where do you store this data? And how do you store it? And essentially privacy concerns, that chain of custody, once again, is a big deal. But yeah, cloud computing, you look at drones, the cloud is huge for us.
But you know what? That's also a great thought, is that marrying those thoughts together, drones, cloud, computing, data, you know, big data, all of that together.
You could effectively argue that what a drone is a sensor. I mean,
it's a data collector. That's what we call it. It's just a data collector. That's all it's doing. I was at Impact 15, which is the Internet Marketing Association, and they couldn't understand how do we use drones. And then their whole their opening video for the start of Impact 15 was shot by a drone. And I'm like, you guys are just asking me, how are you going to use drones? And it's literally in front of your face.
You just did.
You just did.
Right.
And when you look at marketing, you think of all this data that they actually do collect, that unmanned aircraft do collect. You can do a lot of data dumping, a lot of data mining coming along with it. And then we have privacy concerns.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's all they are. They're just big data collectors, and that's what you have to look at them as.
Oh,
sure.
yeah.
I mean, they're a bit like a very sophisticated version of one of Johnny's sensors. I mean, you know, and I'm being kind of facetious about it, but there is that sense of, is there someone in the room, or am I filming as he's going down the road? It's just, as you rightly say, it's just more data. What do you do with all of this? I think that Microsoft in the space that we play in, or I play in specifically, is I don't think they're very interested in video conferencing because it's way too small a market for them. You know, they could dominate the whole thing if they chose to. But there's not enough money in it for them. But I think that they've been creeping up on the UC play, the Unified Communications guys, the Avayas, the Mitels, the Cisco call managers. That is a game changer in that world. Now, whether Skype for Business 15 or Skype for Business as it is now, will that be the breakthrough product for Microsoft? I don't know. I suspect probably not. But the point with Microsoft is they can take another 10 years to beat this. It's very interesting to me about, you know, we talk about business models, and one of the things I look at is business models a lot. I was working, and they'll remain nameless for the purposes of this little story, but it illustrates how Cisco has the ability to work, which no other player, bar one, has. And that one, of course, is Microsoft. I was once, I was out of this, we had an account, I sold this account about 140 video conferencing systems in the days when video conferencing systems cost significant money. And the guy who had run that department left the company and went off and did something else. And the new fella came in, who I also knew, he'd been his sort of second in charge. And he bumped into me at some event. I was no longer on the account either. And he said, yeah, something strange happened the other month. I said, what's that? He said, the first day I had the job as global head of video conferencing for this large company, I got a phone call from reception telling me 3 Cisco people are in the reception to see you. And I said, well, I haven't got an interview. They haven't made an appointment with me. I don't know who these people are. Send them away. Put the phone down, thought nothing of it. 20 minutes later, he gets a phone call from the CIO of the bank, who said, there's 3 men from Cisco in reception to see you. You got to see them. He's like, hang on, aren't we the customer? And he said, no, you've missed this. There's Cisco. We have a partnership with Cisco. And they walked into his office and said, I know you've got all this other manufacturer's gear, but we're going to replace it with Cisco over the next few years. And he's like, don't you think it's my decision as to what systems we use? And they laughed and said, yeah, well, we'll be making certain that this is all ripped out and replaced with Cisco. And we're here to help you do it. And within 3 months, they were ripping out those systems. And one of the things that Avaya and SureTel and Mitel and all the other normal, reasonable, rational organizations are not in a position to do is tell CIOs what to do. So Cisco at some level don't care about those people, but they do care about Microsoft because Microsoft is just as powerful in those big corporates as they are. And that's why Cisco Call Manager is such a, one, strategically important, and two, why Cisco is so terrified of Microsoft.
Yeah. No, all great discussion, I tell you. And this could be talked about for a long time. And I tell you what, Simon, it would be great to get back together and really delve into it in 2016 and everything involving the video conferencing UC space. The IMCCA, I'm going to be talking to people there in 2016 as well. Carol Zelkin, I had a great interview with her at Infocom. Dr. Ann Aaron, I met her at Infocom Connections. We're going to talk more. So there should be some real great insights coming up. But yeah, there's definitely going to be more discussion on that. Now, I wanted, before we wrap up, to get to one more subject, and that's something that Johnny lives in this world too, and that's mobile devices, iOS, Android. Johnny is an Android person. I don't know what you are, Chris. Oh, you're an iOS, right, Chrissy? Yes.
Absolutely. I'm an Apple junkie.
You're Apple junkie, yes. Okay. Johnny is Android through and through. Don't ever try to get him to convert. So, but what I want to talk about is mobile devices as they apply to the industry, collaboration, and even drones, because of course, you're using mobile devices, Chrissy, to operate drones. You're using iPads and what have you. So, Johnny, why don't you start off that discussion for a few minutes before we go to wrap?
Okay. I love Android. You mentioned that. But I'm going to give it to Apple with the iPad. The iPad changed the industry because, not that you couldn't do this with, and you can, an Android tablet, but the iPad has literally replaced so many touch panels in boardrooms, in commercial spaces, in homes, in everywhere as the main interface for the control system. It is far less expensive, and it can still do the same function that a very proprietary, expensive, dedicated touch panel can do for much cheaper. It still serves as the control unit, and it costs a fraction of what that size box, if you will, from brand A through Z costed, and will be basically discontinued a year later. The iPad was like the very first device that you could take around, walk with you, mount on the wall, slap up there for very cheap, and just talk to your processor or processors, depending on the size of your project and what it's doing, and just use it as the graphic user interface, give it some buttons, give it some functionality, and assign it to a room or the entire building, depending on what you're doing. And it is so cheaper and generally prettier because of the pixel count and the coloring to do the same function. And so it really changed the way that we do stuff. And I guarantee, and it doesn't have to be the tablet, but like the mobile device, whether that is Chrissy having an iPhone or me having an Android phone, everybody has, I guarantee, one of these things in their home, if not multiple of these devices. It's just the age that we live in. I know a few people that still have a flip phone out there, and I know you're struggling to get away from that old thing. I myself have a pager. When I don't want to talk to people, I just give my pager number. You can page me, I'll call you back, whatever.
He does have a pager.
I just pretend I'm a doctor. It never works. We'll just say that.
Yeah.
The mobile device, it is the control interface of the future that we live in. The only downside to it, in my opinion, is it does not have tactile buttons, which I very much love, because you can't feel like you can on a button, a remote, if you will.
A button push, sure.
Remote done, right?
Yeah.
So you have to take a few more seconds to look at something, as opposed with a handheld remote with tactile buttons that you just kind of know on a universal style remote, if you will,
Yeah.
things are. But essentially, the mobile device has changed the way we do everything in our life. Everything. In commercial spaces, residential, everywhere.
Absolutely. Simon, so mobile devices, collaboration.
Yeah, I mean, they're getting, obviously in the UC space, they're getting huge. People are saying, why are you going to give me a desk phone when I could simply run your phone, as it were, my extension as an app on my phone? I don't want on my cell phone. It seems to be, so people look at you like, you want me to have a desk phone or a phone on a USB cable out the side of my computer? What are you talking about? I mean, a perfect example, I'm an iPhone bigot. I have Vonage, the Vonage app on my phone. It's great. It works great. And if I was a bigger organization than me, then I'd probably go for something like a ShoreTel. ShoreTel's product, excellent in that space. Mitel does very well in that space too. I mean, why wouldn't you do it? Out of interest, Johnny, I've got a question for you. In my experience of panels, and when you said A through Z, you meant A through C, of course, of panel manufacturers. But those panels, in my experience, people would tell you, and I've been in 1,000 boardrooms in every major city it appears in the world, and everyone will tell you, our design for this panel is better than everyone else's. And this is super intuitive for all my users. Although I wrote recently about there's no such thing as intuitive. But one of the problems these things do is they go to sleep. And then all the users, in my experience, I don't know if you'd agree with me here, seem terrified that if they touch the screen to wake it up, that somehow the building would explode, or, you know, everyone's arm would fall off, or, you know, some catastrophic thing would happen. And I think people are nervous of those touch panels because they don't know what it will do. But I think there's that familiarity with an iPad or even with an Android device. Oh, it's an iPad. iPads don't kill me. And you know, I think that's not just the fact that it's high density count and got a nice user interface and it's cheap to buy and easy to program and all that, but I think it's familiarity. And I think familiarity is something that people crave. Do you agree, or do you think I'm just smoking crack?
Well, we could all be smoking crack, but I strongly agree with you. Yes, there is familiarity. I'll give my mom as an example. She's one of the people that had fought technology for a long time, and I bought her an iPhone. I said, no, this is your new best friend. You live in the future. We're here. You deal with this. And she didn't want it. She did not want it. She did not. I just want a phone. I just want to do phone. And now I can't get her off of the internet. And it's just so simple for her. And texting has just become fluid. It took a while, right? But it's so familiar with her. And it's kind of like when one thing changes on the new update on the iPhone, it's like, oh, no, this isn't there anymore. This is, you know, where's that old thing? It takes a little bit. But if I were to give her, you know, like a Crestron or an AMX or whoever panel, she wouldn't know what to do. And I could explain it just like I do the remotes downstairs that are not as intuitive, right? She'll never learn it. And I just, you know, over and over. But with an iPhone, there is a familiarity. It is very easy to use. It becomes simple. Everyone has one around you. It's just something that we live and breathe, basically. It's part of the world that we live in.
It's funny.
I was going to say in aviation we have, and I'm sure it's kind of across the board, I've noticed this with marketing, it's called the law of primacy. And the law of primacy states that which is learned first is learned best. So in aviation, as an instructor pilot, they always have to remember that it's going to be harder to train somebody on their second aircraft than they are on their first aircraft. They'll always kind of remember that first aircraft that they have. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things in pretty much any industry that you look at, especially I see it in unmanned aircraft right now, if somebody's first aircraft is a DJI, that's what they're always gonna kind of go towards. It's gonna be really hard to get them to go to a unique. It's going to be hard for them to go to a 3D robotics. So we talk about this first to market. Well, one of the things you really have to work on is you have to be the first in the hands of somebody, because once you're familiar with it, I love my iPhone. I'm not going to go to an Android because now I have to learn an entire new operating system. And it's a waste of time. I'm familiar with this. Maybe an Android is better, but this is what I'm comfortable and familiar with.
Well, you know what? And let me add in here.
Privacy.
Well, let me add in here too, because now this extends. So familiarity is one word, but native is another word. Yeah. So that now extends into business, and that now brings in that acronym that the industry uses so well called BYOD. So when you're talking about bring your own device, it's essentially a native device to the user. They say BYOD, but in reality, it refers to a device native to the user that they want to use their own device and not have to, if you're an iOS user, you certainly want the company giving you an Android. That's your comfort zone using that device. So it becomes native to use. And at that point, that becomes a very important component. So when you talk about BYOD technologies, well, I really refer to it as mobility, okay, or even mobilized. But, in that sense, then, as you're referring to, Chrissy, is it becomes a native device experience to the user. So whether you're using it in collaboration, anything from video conferencing to using Slack or Cisco Spark or what have you, you want to use your own device. And honestly, in drones, when you're operating a drone, you want to use your iPad, something that's native to you. So I think it crosses all technology sectors, AV, IT, and the rest. And even IoT control, Johnny, where you're using that native device to control at that point.
Yes, and so I'll go back to yes, I love Android, but a few years back, I was, I think, or the internet would agree that I was strongly against Apple everything. But I started buying Apple devices because familiarity. My customers, your customers,
that's right.
Apple. Some of them use Android. And even now, I've started to mess around with Microsoft Windows phones because that seems to be something that moving forward. Not once will I ever use BlackBerry. That's just not going to happen. That's never going to come to market. No one is ever. I've had a couple people like, "What about BlackBerry?" I'm like, "You can just walk away from this conversation." It's never going to happen.
But Johnny, so we're talking about Apple products and BYOD. So there are products out there which are very, very successful and done very well, and in fact, I rather like them. Barco, for example, Click Connect. Great product.
The ClickShare.
ClickShare, I'm sorry. Yeah. ClickShare.
That's okay.
$1,500, $1,800, $2,000. I mean, sure, nice. Apple TV 4 does much of the same thing, $150. And so I'm wondering, in your world, are you finding that traditionally there was that world of people really good high-end home theater type stuff would end up using commercial grade technologies? And now it seems it's the other way around, that businesses are increasingly using things like Apple TVs and iPads and stuff like that in their ventures. Is that something you're seeing, that you're kind of bleeding up or bleeding down, or whichever way you bleed? I
think I'm going to still caution the fact that those are consumer devices, where Barco is a commercial market product. It's a commercial market name, and I think the weight that carries in terms of being commercial market product, the price certainly does fit the mold. Yeah, sure, Apple TVs are showing up and all of that.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, Corey. I'm not having to go to the Barco product at all.
Oh, no, I get it.
Is that there is that push, right? That the consumer space to be bleeding into the commercial space.
Yeah.
And is it as good? No. But does it do much of the functionality? I mean, I know, for example, my last company, we put Apple TVs in every meeting room because they were so cheap. Someone went down the Apple store and bought 50 of them or 30 of them.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to say, Simon. It's in the boardroom we have in our Napa facility, the other office I used to work out of, we didn't have an Apple TV in there. And so when I would meet with certain reps, the first thing on the mouth was, "Oh, you guys don't have an Apple TV up here?" I could just walk up with my iPhone or my Mac and just screen share. We're done. Simple, cheap. put one up there. I work with other integrators, and they just said, "Oh, we just give them away to our customers for free because it just works." It's just here's a little stepping stone into technology. It just works. It's simple. That leads to the next service basically as a little added bonus because it costs $150. It's nothing.
Right.
I mean, it still costs money, but it works, and I guarantee that customer will be happy.
Yeah.
It just works.
No, as an add-in like that, it makes a lot of sense in the world. And there are people who will argue that too, Johnny, with, don't give anything away or don't give services away and
I
stuff
know.
like that. But, I think it makes a lot of sense if you're doing some forward thinking for the customer and for business as well. So, but anyway, let's kind of wrap this up. So we're going to kind of wrap this up to say, what do you think was the biggest achievement you saw either in the market or in technology this year? Simon.
I think it has to be the two things really. They're combined: the emergence of the cloud players and how they're coming to dominate all the growth in the VC market. And I think the emergence of products like Slack and Spark, which will transform the way that people do business. This whole idea of email is the basis of the way everyone does things. And I think that things like Spark and Slack will change that. And sure, there's been some interesting M&A in this market, but I think that what we're in the process of doing, and we're not there yet, and it'll may not even happen in X16, but it happened this year, was this sense that we could see a new way of working. We're in the middle of a business process and accession event for the way that people do business. And I think that is the most interesting development, even though I don't know where it'll end. But it's certainly the first step on an interesting path. I'm excited about it.
What Rowan Trollope stated about Spark, in terms of the reduction of emails, he said, I think, upwards of 80%. Now, I think Cisco is saying, well, at least 50%, but he's claiming a lot more than that. And if it's true, I've got to tell you, I mean, the revolution that's bringing. You
think about the way that we all live in instant messenger and telephony and email and CRM, and they're all disjointed and it's all a mess.
Yeah.
And to get all that into one pot and have that manageable and searchable and controllable is so different. And that will, hopefully the business model, the business process that we use today, which is now no longer fit for purpose. Maybe 15 years ago it was, when you only received 10 emails a day, you could probably cope with an email inbox and no instant messenger. Now, I mean, when I was at Life Science, I was receiving on average 200 emails a day. Mm-hmm. Where do you end all that? It has to change. And I think most people in a corporate environment are looking for something else. Mm-hmm. So I think products like Slack, Spark, Circuit, and others, that's what Dave Michaels calls WCC, workflow communications. I think that's going to be that started this year. It'll be interesting to see where it goes.
Dave being one of the UCC industry experts, I listen to him a lot. Johnny, what do you got?
I forgot. I've been taking, or I bought some ginkgo biloba pills to increase my memory, but I keep forgetting to take it. So
you might want to double up.
For me,
not take 2 a day. By doubling up for you, it'd be not take 2 a day.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Or I'll have to write that down so I remember it though. Controls. And I know we're not talking about 2016, but it's right there. Maybe invite me back on the next podcast. We can talk about CES and what's going to be announced at CES. But I guarantee this year moving forward into the wrap is controls. Smart everything. Internet connected everything. Buildings completely controlled. And just tip for a simple saving and controls, dimming, right? Dim one light in your house. Dim it 10% less. The perceived light level loss cannot be detected by the human eye. So saving 10% and you can't detect it, save energy, save power, save America. There you go.
So, Johnny, you don't know it yet, but actually we are coming back together after CES to talk about CES. And
what?
Yes, that's right. You heard it here first, Johnny. Be back.
I'm
in
going to write that down
2016.
so I remember it.
Yes, put it on the calendar. Chrissy Ing, what you got?
So unlike the other two guests, I would say is I don't think that the big thing about the industry that I'm in that it wasn't hardware or software. I would have to say that it's the emotional acceptance of unmanned aircraft and how a year ago the people that we would call and say, hey, this is a great technology for you. You need to embrace it. This is how it's going to work. Especially, we look at avalanche, search and rescue, and they just really pushed us away and said, we have no need for this technology. We don't understand it. We don't want it. We don't see it. We don't see it at all. And now they have completely embraced it. You look at companies, you look at the NFL, CNN, Union Pacific, these huge companies have started to embrace this technology, whereas a couple of years ago, nobody wanted anything to do with it. They didn't think that it was a part of their business plan or their business model. There was no place for it. And today, there's almost not there. I can't think of more than maybe 5 industries where unmanned aircraft will not be integrated somehow in that industry. And one of those industries is cosmetology. I mean, when I say that I can't think of of industries that this isn't going to affect, they're very limited industries that unmanned aircraft are already a part of.
I think that's one of the big positives is that it's going to span industries. Again, I think where the people in this market are concerned, they have to see that this is something that can really span markets and become, an add. I won't even say value add. I just say an add to the business in terms of this. And again, Christina Eng is somebody who can certainly guide people along the right course of action with this. Yeah, absolutely, Christina. There's no question about it. I guess what I'm going to say is the maturity, or let's say the growing maturity of IT, software-based applications. Again, Simon refers to cloud, and I do too. Really, what I guess I'll call the growing mature outlook of the industry, where manufacturers are paying more attention to it. Are the integrators? Well, hopefully they're going to follow suit if they aren't already. And I know there are those who are, and there are those who are very interested. And for those who are saying, well, I don't know if it's for us, okay, that may all be well and good in your realm. If you're dealing with digital signage, video walls, and all of that technology, that is certainly current technology that is booming. So I'm not going to say to them, well, okay, you have to stop looking at that, of course. But your standard room integrations, projection, and of course it's still going to happen. But I think when you're looking at those other technology ads with, again, software-based applications and all in cloud and more IT, and then you can get into, and then if you go really out there, going at data centers, structured cabling, things of that nature, there are companies who do it already. They do that side of the business too on IT. So I think it's certainly growing. I think 2016, you're going to see more of it. I'm actually hoping to see more of it at Infocom. And I tell you, I've always said, Simon, where Cisco's concerned, I think it's time to bring the IT side, to the integration market. I would think. I mean, would that make sense to you? And other companies bring more of the IT side, like Microsoft and what have you?
Well, maybe, but actually, I think that there's actually an even more interesting development in the IT business, which is that cloud means that it isn't just the IT department that now spends money on IT. So actually, the Microsoft Cisco duopoly that's existed for the last 10 years, 15, 20 years about who makes decisions on IT is going away. I read recently that within the next 5 years, the average CMO will have a larger IT budget than the CIO.
Yes.
Now, one of the things that I think that does is, one, break the duopoly of Microsoft and Cisco, right? Because people like the CMO don't care about technologies, they care about business solutions. And secondly, I think it's a fantastic opportunity for the resellers to go and have a different conversation with a different type of person within their customers. But the problem is that most of them today aren't well equipped to go and have those conversations. So they walk in the door and try and talk about bits and bytes. And if you try and talk about bits and bytes to a CMO, a chief marketing officer, they don't know or care about what you're saying. So they need to re-educate themselves. So actually, I think that the ground is moving from underneath the people who have done manufacturer level, have done very well. I don't suggest they're not going to do well in the future, but I think there's opportunities for others. And I think that's very interesting.
I think of more than talking about the CIO and everybody targets the CIO, of course, you have the CTO. Hey, listen, the CEO gets involved in these kinds of situations too at times, but not only to talk about them and what they are and who they are, but actually figure out better ways to approach them on the technology side.
Well, they don't see it as a technology. You know, for example, if you were to put a CRM system in 20 years ago, 15 years ago, you'd have to talk to the CIO. You'd end up with a big box in your basement running a big application. Well, that's all gone away now. Salesforce is rarely run by the IT departments. It's mainly run by the marketing departments.
True.
They don't see it as a technology. They see it as a service they're running. And that fundamentally changes the conversation the reseller has with the customer, because the customer is no longer a technical guy who just wants the thing to work. He's got a business person who has a business problem he needs to fix.
It changes the business model.
Yeah,
it changes the business model and on how you sell these products.
Yeah,
Completely.
And you said that one word, service. Selling as a service. You've got your as a service solutions. Managed services.
So your sales is different. The gap between what sales is and sales, pre-sales and post-sales changes because you're reselling every month. You're looking to add value every month to the existing clients. Who you're selling to is different, so your marketing is different. It's much more important these days to be a subject matter expert and to be the go-to guy, right? Chrissy was saying earlier about the first thing you learn to fly is the thing you then judge everything else by, right? So if you're the first person to get into a client and tell him how CRM works or UC works, they will judge everything else relative to that solution, both good and bad.
Yeah.
There's a huge opportunity for the resellers out there to reinvent what being a reseller is and who they sell to. I actually think there's a great big opportunity for them. I just don't know that they know how to do it. And I think I do.
Well, okay. Well, there you go. Simon Dudley, Chief Contrarian of Accession Events.
You can argue with me if you like, but remember, I'm the Chief Contrarian.
I think he'll enlighten you more than don't argue with Simon. That's not a good thing to do. But no, I think to carry that just one step forward, it's not just about getting the meeting, because getting the meeting is fine and all of that and being in front of them, but you have to bring a lot more substance to the table. And again, becoming a subject matter expert, investing in these technologies, not just partnering, but actually investing, the time, and not just the money if there is money involved, but the time and the education and all of that. I think it builds the winning business. There's no question about it. I'm sure you agree, Simon.
Oh yeah, completely. You go in and talk to a CMO about how fast your Ethernet switch is and how many phone calls an hour you could cope with. No one gives a toss. It's irrelevant.
Right.
I have this problem that 40% of my customers go away every year and we don't know who they are. Could you help me with that with a CRM system?
Right.
Yes. How does it work? Warm tapioca and 600 Oompa Loompas peddling like crazy in the basement. And I said that once to a client, and he looked at me with, but we don't have a basement. And I said, that's all right. They're metaphorical.
Well, you rent a basement and,
put the Oompa Loompas in it. I said to him, do you really care how it works? He goes, no, I just felt obliged to ask you.
Right.
Now they don't even feel obliged to ask because they're business people who have business problems. Solve those. They're the things that matter.
Johnny, what do you think about the Oompa Loompa approach, huh?
I need to hire some of those. I need some help over here. My little assistant is working really hard and not getting all the work done.
There you go. Johnny needs an Oompa Loompa to go with his little assistant there. So
there might be a 2016 prediction.
Let's come back in 2016 and see where that goes. But anyway, so this has all been great discussion. So we really looked at 2015 with different markets. different technologies. A little into 2016, but again, Simon will be coming up in a week, and we're not going to divulge who with or, but it should be something very good, I would think, and I'm going to look out for it, and hopefully you all will too. It's going to be advertised, I'm sure. Johnny, where are you going to be next week?
I don't know where exactly. I just know I'll be eating tacos.
Wherever it is, he will be eating tacos and doing AV Power Up. Don't forget about that.
That is a fact.
And Chrissy Yang, what's on your schedule for the first week of the new year?
So the first week of the new year, you can come and see me at CES. I will be at the Stampede Global booth.
Mm-hmm.
Johnny Moda is giving me the big hands up, I guess. So yeah. So if you have any other questions and stuff, it's the first time I'm going to CES.
Yeah, you should have a blast.
But
But
let me give you just like two things: comfortable shoes and hand sanitizer.
yeah.
Ooh, I have the comfortable shoes, so.
Yeah. Invest in a lot of hand sanitizer. But I have one more prop that I forgot to hold up, and there it is.
Oh, nice.
Okay, and I think the person, if she's watching now, knows this is her present. But this was picked up at the Drone Expo in D.C. Okay, that was co-located with Government Video Expo. Christina was there, had a session on FAA and regulations, well attended. And yes, Chrissy will be at CES. Please, if you're there, go see her in Stampede. And, that's great. So wrapping it up, Simon, New Year's wish for everybody?
Oh, yeah, definitely you should have one.
At least one, right?
Just one. Only one, man.
Just one wish.
Don't be greedy. Just get one.
Just
Not
one.
two.
And work at it, because it won't happen just because you wish it.
Yeah, no. Wishes don't come true. So, Johnny, one?
Always plan on planning to do something.
Okay. Chrissy?
I'm hoping to be sponsored by Guinness.
Oh! And now,
like you said,
revealed.
your wishes won't come true. So
No, no, I think yours is going to come true.
and Helen Greiner. So
yes, and I was going to say yes, and her too. For me, listen, I can only wish the industry the best of luck in 2016 as we motor forward into bigger and better things. And thank you, everybody out there, for watching. And we will see you in 2016. Thank you.